Welcome to this long-form video on rolling. We'll cover the 4 archetypal rolls that we do in our aqua practice. We'll also speak about why rolling may be good in the first place and whom it's for, and we'll come to training recommendations at the end of the video. Plus, for every roll that I mention in this video, you can find a link to the long-form, detailed tutorial in this video as well. So let's get to it. Whom is rolling for? Well, for the very weak, rolling can be a strength building exercise. For the very immobile, it can be a way to find certain ranges and become more mobile again. But for the majority of us, it's a good coordination exercise because you need to be aware of your whole body. You've got very direct feedback from the ground. It's not like, let's say I'm lifting heavy weights and like, yeah, I'm doing it. It's like, no, if you practice roll on a hard ground and you can't do it, you will know. Your body will tell you because there might be small bruises. Good recommendation to the beginning of the video: if you practice rolls for the first time, find a soft ground. But the most important reason that I haven't even mentioned yet to practice rolling is to avoid injury from otherwise harmful falls. And that can be true for any situation where you're learning acrobatics, you're learning martial arts, you're learning parkour or skateboarding or inline skating or anything where you could hurt yourself falling. And that's also true for, well, the people who are at risk of falling. And that can be smaller kids and mature, elderly adults, older adults, I guess. So rolling really has multiple purposes. And besides just strengthening, practicing coordination, a big one is to prevent ourselves from injury. In our acrobatic practice, that being said, we go a little bit beyond that scope. So let's get to our 4 archetypal rolls. The first one we practice is a Fisherman Roll. The Fisherman Roll is a roll from a half kneeling position that gets us across our back. It's an easy roll to understand, not the most basic one, but a good one to start with. And there are regressions for the roll as well. It carries us around the whole back, so our strong backside where there are no vulnerable organs that can get hurt. It's a good way to generally practice falling in a way that gets your head away from the ground. I'll go into a bit more detail in a moment. Second roll, very common roll, is the shoulder roll. I usually don't start there because the shoulder roll is fairly advanced. Anyone who does parkour and uses shoulder rolls on concrete knows you can almost never be too good at rolling well in the shoulder roll. And then we've got the third roll, which for us is the invert roll. This one is not so much a break fall roll because it doesn't come into handy most of the times in avoiding landing on your head because we actually roll across at least the upper shoulder line. But it builds great awareness for a lot of flips and acrobatic elements. Plus, in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, they use it commonly as a warm-up exercise. So there it has some more implications even. The last roll that I barely see anyone practicing, I guess it's the odd one out, is the low bridge roll. Because there we practice to land from an extended position into a shoulder roll. Really helpful for anyone who wants to bail out of a backflip safely. So, the main principles of most rolls, especially when it comes to breakfalling, is getting your weight across the large surface area of your back. Because there, any impact that would otherwise get a hard cut, a sharp hit, gets spread across your body. That's really, really helpful. Let's get into the rolls. So, first one, Fisherman Roll. You set yourself up in a half kneeling position, that's the fisherman squat. You bring your hands onto the ground, and the first step of almost every roll is to use your hands to push into the ground or to gently lower the ground towards you. From here, you'll fold your arms to get onto the side of your shoulder. Second step is almost always folding at some point or another. So, from the fisherman position, slowly getting onto your shoulder. Some people do shoulder and hip at the same time. The secret here is you want to find a way that feels the best for you, and you'll best find it by testing it on a hard ground. Because there you'll feel maybe you're getting onto that spiky bit on your hip and it doesn't feel too good. Maybe you even feel like, you could be bruising if you would be doing it too quickly. So start slowly. But once you're on your back, then I recommend first practice rolling up on the same side because it's a reversing mechanism. Go in and you go back up, in and back up. Once you get good at that, then you can roll all the way through and get up to the other side, or you can practice first your other side, then you've done both ways of getting into the roll, and then you can do the full fisherman roll. Very good roll. Sometimes I teach something called the practice roll. I think we have a separate tutorial on that, which is almost a simplified version of the Fisherman Roll. I've taught something called the starfish roll before as well. All of those are essentially the same rolls. It's like you're rolling across the long side of your body, not flipping over, but turning sideways to absorb impact and become aware of your body. Okay, second roll, shoulder roll. Super important for any martial artist. Very important for parkour as well. In a secret for the shoulder roll that I found works is, when it comes to teaching it, first learning the backwards shoulder roll tends to be easier for people who are afraid of flipping over too quickly, because there you can slow down the motion. Again, for the full tutorial, check out the link. Go straight there if you're curious about how to learn the shoulder roll in that specific way. On the other hand, I found that for some people who are especially not as flexible, going backwards first can be hard. So those would be more the bulky guys who don't curve their spine very well, but who have a lot of protective muscle layers and who don't mind just rolling onto the floor. For you guys, it can be helpful to get straight into the forward roll, because the backwards shoulder roll could be confusing. Eventually, you want to be relatively apt at both sides, left and right, because then whenever there's any incident where you need to use the roll, you can actually protect yourself. A quick story, when I first learned the shoulder roll, I fell over my bike like half a year after first learning it. I did a perfect shoulder roll, I stood up, my friends looked at me, I was like, what happened? I'm fine. And that was a great story of how I didn't hurt myself using a shoulder roll. Okay, anyhow, third roll, invert roll. Really interesting roll. I recommend to start with a plow, a yoga pose where you just roll back, because you want to be comfortable resting your hip over your shoulders with your head being in a very flexed position. Good way to start. Then there's the half invert roll where you start with a plow, then you roll out sideways. There's a trick where you cross over your legs again for the tutorial. To learn this specific roll, get straight into it. This roll I find the most helpful when it comes to learning side flips, because it teaches you the right axis to rotate over. Additionally, it's a really good tool to build awareness because you're fully inverted, but you can also kind of slowly and fluidly pass through it. Good roll to practice. Last one is the low bridge roll. It's coming from a low bridge rotation, rolling onto the shoulder and out the opposite hip. It's good for anyone who is afraid of the macaco, because there's a point where you're really arched. It means if you're arched and you fall, you don't want to be lost. You want to have some sort of vocabulary that teaches you how to deal with that situation specifically. Also, it's kind of a way to bail out of a backflip. Well, if you practice backflips, I recommend landing them instead of bailing them, but it's good to become aware of how to roll out of that backspace, which I remember Ido Portal is speaking about sometimes. So there you have it. Those are our 4 major rolls. When it comes to training recommendations, I like to set myself up with sets and reps for the rolls as well. So anytime you have one set consisting of 5 rolls left, 5 rolls right, then you can make a small tick in your box and maybe you do 3 sets of those. So let's say I do 5 shoulder rolls left, 5 shoulder rolls right, and I do 3 rounds, 3 sets of those, and I've done 15 shoulder rolls. When I combine some other rolls into it, then I know over time I just accumulate the right number that it needs in order to get really good at the skill. And for rolling, it's almost like the more you do it, the better you get. Wonders, right? So that brings me to, generally speaking, do practice the rolls in sets. I feel it's better than just rolling around, because you lose track of time, which can be good and playful as well. But when it comes to really owning the skill, repetition and remembering the repetition can be helpful. So since you've got 4 rolls, the way you could set yourself up is practice the best version that you can do of the Fisherman Roll. Then practice the best version of the shoulder roll, of the invert roll, and of the low bridge roll. Then you've got 1 block of rolls that you can practice, and you can repeat the block once or twice, meaning 1 set of each roll, go through all the rolls, then do a second set, maybe a third set. Another recommendation is take breaks in between, because if you roll a lot and over again, you can get dizzy, which can keep you from practicing. So you may want to take breaks, watch your breathing, slow things down if it gets too tricky. And last but not least, it's very important to mention this, because some people think of rolling as a basic exercise, because it's not as fancy as doing a somersault or something, and we're not lifting any heavy weights. every single roll can be regressed. So there is an easier version that you can do. So in case you get stuck at any of the rolls, look for the in-depth tutorial and do the easiest version that you can still comfortably do. Quality always over quantity. If you start getting really messy, then maybe stop, practice something else that you still have the focus to do. And that's it for today, I think. Nothing to mention other than check out our Instagram channel, Shared Space Movement. There we post the minimal videos where you can just get inspiration for the day. But when it comes to YouTube, subscribe and follow, because here you'll get the majority of in-depth information. Peace out. See you soon. I'm off to my Sunday acrobatics class now.